talk about my experience at the City of Sydney Community Engagements Unit, where I work on the Art&About Festival and Chinese New Year festivals. In this video, I want to talk about ways that we could do better for the Chinese New Year Festival and Art&About Festival in the 2020s. Number one, bring back the emerging artist group. Unfortunately, last time I visited was 2015. They no longer put it in the central walkway, eighth of the size, and then one of the side walkways, which is also the entrance to the night noodle market. And if you look at the geographical coverage, that the night noodle market took up a really huge amount of space, equivalent to about 3 blocks of Sydney CBD, while there's a small walkway about 100 meters with artwork to be almost like an opening act of a noodle market. In the 2000s, during the Art&About Festival, you can see an outdoor exhibition of the huge banners printed of the artist's work at the central walkway of the High Park, which is basically Sydney's Central Park, if you may. And when people and tourists walk around it, that's the main walkthrough that people can go and see the artworks of these previously unknown artists, and now they have a stage in one of the landmarks of a major city in Australia. Bring back the emerging artist group. And I think in the 2020s that we can see, with social distancing, I hope that this would be an opportunity for the organizers of the festival to rethink about what they are looking for, because with this focus of making it big, making it very sponsors friendly, it's good for business, it's good for the continuation of the program, but don't leave your audience and the artists behind. Number two is cultural competency. It is very important for a cultural organization or a festival that represents different groups of people to really get to know their stories and history. In one of my biggest criticism about the production of the Chinese New Year Parade one of the years in Sydney was that they had a group of dancers of Chinese heritage dressed as Miss Fortune Cookie, and I found that to be quite cringeworthy, if you may. And I think one of the key things is because there's two things that many people from the Chinese community, they don't really want to talk about misfortune during the Lunar New Year. And on top of that, the fortune cookie was actually an American creation, an achievement of American Chinese. And as great as it is, then having that representation, having that as an idea of a performance in Sydney's Chinese New Year, it didn't sit right. Look, I voiced my opinion at the time, and they still decided to go ahead. That's their choice. That's fine. And then I hope that in the 2020s that things could be a little bit different this time, this decade around. The third thing that I would say, I'm still calling it Sydney Life because I really don't like the new name. It's called Australian Life. Now, as an Australian, as a person who used to live in Sydney, now living in Melbourne, if you have a show, if you have an art exhibition called Australian Life, you ought to make it a touring exhibition and go to all of the major cities. Seriously. But the other part of it is Sydney Live exhibition are kind of like telling your story, for artists to tell their story as part of the community. Many of those artists still have their studios in Sydney, and if you call something Australian Life, that for example, even for people of the migrant community, of the multicultural community, it have a little bit of a exclusion side of it. I'm not going to call it racism or something like that, but I just felt that maybe rename it back to Sydney Live. I mean, focus on the community, focus on individual artists that have their practice set up in Sydney and different groups. Or maybe you can talk about, maybe rename it something else, or just say My Australian Life. Like it's still saying with that personal story of the artist, which can engage with the audience much easier. Because some things is, unfortunately, if you name a show Australian Life, there are political connotation, they nationalism can be played into it, and you just and that didn't feel like the original intent of acknowledging artists and giving artists a representation to tell their own personal stories. There you have it. These are my experience of what I think the festivals can do better in Sydney. But of course, I do hope that there are more festivals coming back, no matter where you are. Like, you know, Sydney, Melbourne, the rest of the world, different cities. But of course, that adhere to social distancing and COVID safe rules. And it is, and I can see that it is actually an opportunity for organizers for programs like Art&About or Chinese New Year to reimagine their thinking, their way of approach, that to be more inclusive and balanced about who, like, you know, regain that balance of the community, the creative people, and the council itself and this business model. And that would bring genuine sustainability, regain or gain more of the local audiences or online audiences. That can be a really good way. Well, that's all of the videos, and thank you so much for dropping by. If you're interested in finding out more or working with me, or just see if there's something compatible with your business, head over to www.chattycurator.com. Feel free to drop me a message or set up a meeting. Let's get chatting.